Hello everyone, welcome or welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for being here. In this video, I will be telling you all about the books that I read during the month of November. But before that, I need some coffee. I just freshly brewed a cup of Ethiopia from Fried Hats, and this is my third cup for the day, but I desperately need it. So it is what it is at this point. So good. So today I brewed Ethiopia from Fried Hats. This has notes of forest fruits, black tea, and peach. I absolutely adore Fried Hats and their coffee. This is not sponsored, but it could be. So Fried Hats, if you're watching, send me some coffee maybe. Anyway, so the first book that I read in November is Vengeful by V. Schwab. This is the second installment of the is it called the Vicious duology? Let's look up on Goodreads. No, okay, so this is called the Villains duology, and this is the last book in that duology. It starts with Vicious, and this is Vengeful. My thoughts on this, I'm not really sure how necessary it was in the context of the duology overall. But I did enjoy the story that V. Schwab was able to portray in this. We obviously follow some characters from the first book, but also some new characters are introduced. And in typical V. Schwab fashion, the stories and the timelines are intertwined. And I think that kind of structure works really well for this duology. So this book is no exception. The chapters were short, and I just kept reading and reading and reading because I felt like I couldn't stop. So it definitely is very well written. If you read the first one and you are already attached to the characters, this is Vengeful by V. Schwab. The next book that I read, it's quite an unusual one for me. This is the book format or book version of My Neighbor Totoro by Hayao Miyazaki from Studio Ghibli. I loved the movie, obviously, as everyone else, and the book is no exception. I was able to read this in a gloomy day, and this just brought me so much joy because I felt like I kind of forgot what this movie and this story was all about. So yeah, My Neighbor Totoro, I had a great time with this one. It reminded me of childhood. It's just so heartwarming and the type of story that truly works for everyone and anyone at any age and at any point in your life. So I love this one. Next up, I have a book from an author that is very well loved, very popular, and this is their newest release. I am talking about The Lost Story by Meg Schaefer. I highly enjoyed this one. We are following these two guys in the beginning who are just like very young. They got lost in the woods. Their parents are obviously so worried. The police is involved. Everyone is searching for them and no one was able to find them. And after 6 months from their disappearance, they are found in the woods by a nurse. But the catch is that one of the boys doesn't really remember anything from what happened to them. And the other one remembers everything, but he just seems like he couldn't verbalize what they went through. And then we have a time jump of 15 years. And now in present day, Rafe and Jeremy, the two boys, are not on great terms. They don't really seem to speak with each other. Rafe is this kind of like detective that is able to find missing girls, and Jeremy seems to be just like somewhere secluded in a house in the woods. Afterwards, we are meeting another character, Emily, who lost her sister like a long time ago, and she is reaching out to Rafe for help. And all three of them are embarking on this journey to find Emily's missing sister. This is truly a genre-bending book because in the beginning it feels like a mystery and thriller, like very fast-paced and eerie, and it just continues in that way. But later on we also have elements of magical realism and potentially fantasy. I don't want to spoil this book too much because I feel like you shouldn't know that much about it going into it. Structurally, the book is unique, I would say, because we have all of these chapters with the storyteller's intermissions, and they are breaking the fourth wall and telling us a bit more about what's to come or what's happening. It's very on the nose in that aspect. I just feel like Meg Schaefer did an amazing job with the structure of this book. I was very proud of myself because I was able to guess what was happening, who was the narrator, and it was just like a great time. So this is The Lost Story by Meg Schaefer. The next book that I read is Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas, and let me read you the blurb for this one. So it says, Yadriel has summoned a ghost, and now he can't get rid of him. When his traditional Latinx family has problems accepting his gender, Yadriel becomes determined to prove himself a real brujo. With the help of his cousin and best friend Maritza, he performs the Quinces ritual himself, and then sets out to find the ghost of his murdered cousin Miguel and set it free. However, the ghost he summons is actually Julian Diaz, the school's resident bad boy, and Julian is not about to go quietly into death. He's determined to find out what happened and tie up some loose ends before he leaves. Left with no choice, Yadriel agrees to help Julian so that they can both get what they want. But the longer Yadriel spends with Julian, the less he wants to let him leave. This is basically a queer fantasy romance, or I would truly say romantasy more so, because I just feel like the fantasy elements are not that strong in the book, even though we have this element of the ghosts and the brujos and stuff like that. What I really appreciated about this book was the accent on coming to terms with who you are, with LGBTQ plus acceptance, the fact that the main character is a trans boy, and kind of the struggles that he has to overcome daily with his family and with his loved ones. The fantasy plotline, I was not that huge of a fan of, just because to me personally, some of the things didn't really make sense. But in the end, everything came together, kind of. So if you are looking for this kind of story that leans more towards the romance and the human connection and the inner feelings of the characters and not that much on the fantasy aspect of it, maybe this book is for you. Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. This next book was very rough for me personally because I love Stephanie Garber's writing. I loved Caraval. Actually, let's not exaggerate. I liked Caraval. I loved Once Upon a Broken Heart. This is a novella set in the universe of the Caraval trilogy. Actually, I don't think I said what this book is. So this is Spectacular by Stephanie Garber, and it's just intended to be like a silly, goofy, fun Christmas novella. For me personally, though, I was just like so annoyed throughout the entirety of this book just because the characters didn't really feel like themselves. Tella and Legend were acting very, very strangely. You have this whole like kink adjacent thing that is happening that was never consented by anyone, and it just gave me the ick so much. I will say though, the illustrations in this book are so well done, but for me it was just not enough to make me at least like this book. It was kind of a struggle bus, and yeah, I didn't really enjoy it. Maybe it's not for me. I have like a full-on reading vlog of me actually reading this book, and I went more in depth in my explanation as to why I didn't really enjoy this book there. So maybe watch that if you want to get a bit more of my thoughts regarding this book. But yeah, this was not great, unfortunately. Next up, I have read The Nightmare Before Kissmas by Sarah Rosh. This is supposed to be like an in-between book, just between Halloween and Christmas. I will say though, it leans more towards the Christmas side of things, so it's not too late to pick it up if it will sound interesting to you. But basically in this book, we are following the Prince of Christmas as he is dealing with the aftermath of a thing that he did in the past. He doesn't have a great relationship with his father. He has a younger brother, and their relationship is just like so nice and heartwarming. And obviously, as he is very drunkenly lamenting his life choices at a bar one night, he kisses this guy that is maybe potentially the Prince of Halloween. Later on, after a year or so, they meet again and they discover that Christmas is not that joyous and there might be some lingering issues there. The King of Christmas is really depicted in like a ruthless and kind of villainous way in the first like 70-75% of this book, and then the issue is resolved and it's not really explained like why he changed his demeanor and why he's accepting all of a sudden the things that went through, because in the past he didn't do that. So it was like very sudden and it didn't really make a lot of sense for me personally. But come on now, this is a romance book. Like, you're not reading it for the plot, you're reading it for the romantic aspect of it. In the book, you also have all of the texts that the characters are sending to each other. They have a group chat, and the title of their group chat is always like a Christmas pun. I vividly remember that one of the conversations was named, "When I think about you, I touch my elf." You know, it's that kind of a book. So if you're looking for a silly, goofy romance book with LGBTQ plus characters and just like a lot of Christmas talk and political intrigue, but in the same time, nothing really makes sense. The Nightmare Before Kissmas by Sarah Rush. Next up, I have read The 13th Child by Erin A. Craig. This is one of those books that's darker in themes. It deals with life and death and kind of the meaning of life or the meaning of death, depending on how you look at it. I feel like I talked about this book in some other videos as well. I was kind of struggling with picking it back up because I have started reading it and then I kind of paused to read some other books, but then I finally finished it and I am so happy that I did, because even though I wouldn't say this is like my favorite book, it still was really good. In this one, we are following Hazel, who, as the title suggests, is the 13th child, and she is adopted by the god of death from this world. Unfortunately, her parents, her biological parents, are not that great, and she's dealing with a lot of childhood trauma and also the fact that she was never really seen as part of her biological family. After Hazel is taken by the god of death, he is preparing her to become the greatest healer that the world has ever known. And there's a trick though to this healing ability that Hazel will possess in the future, because when she touches people that are sick, she can just see what remedy or medicine they need to get better. But the reverse of that is that for some other people, all she can see is a skull. So that means that those people are destined to die, and she has to poison them in order for them not to struggle with their death. Kind of. The ending of this, I cried like a lot at the end of this book. This feels like a grim fairy tale, dark, gothic, and full of just dark themes. My only issue, and I don't know if this is an issue with the book or just based on how I felt in that specific moment when I read it, but for me the pacing felt a bit strange at times, because the action of the book feels a bit episodic. Like, we meet our character when they're born, when they're 8, when they are 13, and then throughout her adolescence, and then we meet her later on in her life. I just wished we took more time to explain certain things and we didn't spend that much time with other things, if that makes sense. So yeah, The 13th Child by Erin A. Craig. Next up, I have read A Magical Girl Retires, translated in English by Anton Her. This book is very short, but it's just like a gut punch because it deals with a lot of topics. So our main character is 29 years old. After the pandemic, she lost her job. She feels like her life doesn't have any sense and any purpose anymore. And she decides to unalive herself. And just as she's doing that, she discovers that she is a magical girl. And it's the type of magical girl that Sailor Moon is almost. Like, you have a lot of transformation montages and animation during the events of this book. Also, our main character's magical wand is quite literally a credit card, which is funny, but it's also a commentary on today's society and capitalism and stuff like that. The catch with our main character is that she doesn't really know what her magical power is pretty much throughout the whole book, and then when things get a little sticky, let's say, she discovers that she has this very unique power and she's able to save the world and her fellow magical girls. This is about empowerment and about finding meaning in your life. So if you're feeling a bit moody, a bit, anxious, I would recommend this book because it truly feels like there's hope at the end of the tunnel. This is A Magical Girl Retires by Park Sol-yoon. Another short book, this is Mammoth by Eva Baltasar. This is, the cover of this is really doing something for me. So this book is obviously centered on another lesbian narrator. This is part of the triptych trilogy, I think, from Eva Baltasar. And even though these books are not linked between them in terms of worlds or characters, they all have very similar themes and also very similar character concepts. So this is the second Eva Baltasar book that I read. The first one was Permafrost. I absolutely adore that book, and this is no exception as well. Eva Baltasar's writing is so raw and fresh and poetic because she's first and foremost a poet. If you want to read a book about an unhinged character that truly will do everything and anything to destroy their life but also find purpose in the meantime, this is the book for you. I truly cannot wait to get to the other book in this trilogy, which is Boulder. Hopefully I will be able to read that one by the end of 2024. But yeah, highly recommend Mammoth and anything written by Eva Baltasar. Next up, I have read Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellers. And fun story with this book. So I have actually started reading this book last year. I think it was in August or September, something like that, in 2023. I liked the writing. I just felt like I was not in a literary fiction mood, and I decided to just pause and resume my reading once I felt like I could get back into this book. And apparently that time was in November 2024. I have restarted reading this book just because I didn't feel like I remembered that much from it, but I did, and it was amazing. Coco Mellers does not disappoint. I have also read Blue Sisters by the same author, and she just has this very unique way of describing our world and the characters that she's creating. The characters feel like real people with real problems and real struggles. It was the same in Blue Sisters. It's the same in this one. I love Coco Mellers' writing style. It's funny and unapologetic, and these characters are truly some of my favorites just because how toxic they are. But in the same time, as they're struggling through life, they are finding purpose and they find hope. Specifically with this book, we are following Cleo and Frank, and these are their nicknames for each other, Cleopatra and Frankenstein. They meet each other at a New Year's Eve party, and they just decide to marry after 6 months or something like that. Cleo is from either Ireland or UK, I forgot, but she's basically meeting Frank in the US, and they kind of jokingly say that she married him for the visa, but she's always saying that that's not true, and she actually feels a connection with Frank and stuff like that. We also get to meet Cleo's best friend, his struggles with his sexuality, his life in general. We also get to meet Frank's co-worker and her struggles with her father and her family specifically. Also, speaking of Cleopatra and Frankenstein, let's talk about the covers of these books for a second because they are absolutely gorgeous. I don't know who designed these, but kudos to you because I love these. Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellers. Highly recommend this one. And last but not least, I have read The City and Its Uncertain Walls, the new Haruki Murakami book. I want to give you a bit of context as to why this book exists. So Haruki Murakami published a short story or like a novella in a literary magazine in the 1980s. He was not really that proud of that story afterwards because he felt like he could write it in a better way. So he came up with the idea for Hardboiled Wonderland and At the End of the World from that short story. Now in 2020, he felt like there's also another side of the story from Hardboiled Wonderland and The City and Its Uncertain Walls, and he can do it in a slightly different way. He said in the afterwords that it took him 3 years to write this book. He wrote the first part, which is like very similar to Hardboiled Wonderland, and then he made a pause of like a year or something like that to figure out how he can write the second and third part of this book. And I'm so happy that he took his time to figure out what the story is about, because I loved specifically the second part. Why did I explain all this is because I actually started reading this book and I posted like a picture on Instagram, and someone messaged me saying like, hey, what do you think about this book? Because to me so far it's just like copy pasted from Hardboiled Wonderland. And I didn't really know myself what was happening because I read Hardboiled Wonderland when I was in high school, like more than 10 years ago. So even though I didn't remember Hardboiled Wonderland that well, I felt like I read the same story before, and I realized that it was because I have previously read Hardboiled Wonderland. Everything that I explained is in the afterword. So at the end of the book, Haruki Murakami explains the same thing, the context in which he wrote this book. I personally feel like this should have been at the beginning of the book so that everyone knows that this is supposed to be reminiscent of the world from Hardboiled Wonderland. Wait, I have to change my battery real quick. Hold on. Okay, I'm back. So what is this book about? We have a boy and a girl. The boy is our main character. They are obviously in love. He is 17, she is 16. And throughout their whole relationship, she used to tell him that she's not really herself and she's just a shadow, and the real person is trapped in this city that is surrounded by a wall, that she's working in a dream library, and that our main character, the boy, is supposed to become the dream reader from this city. Our main character becomes really fascinated with the story that his girlfriend is telling him, and he starts to write it down so that he doesn't forget it. Fast forward a couple of months afterwards, the girl just disappears all of a sudden. Our main character is obviously spiraling. He doesn't know what happened to his girlfriend, and all his life after that he is in search of this city and its uncertain walls. All of a sudden he just finds this city he wants to enter, and he is forced to leave his shadow at the entrance because shadows are not allowed in this city. He is becoming the dream reader, and he goes to the dream library to meet with his girlfriend. The only problem is that she doesn't really remember him because she's another version of herself. This dream library is not the library of your dreams. It's quite literally a library that doesn't have any books. It's just dreams that are waiting to be read by our main character. We also have his shadow who was left at the entrance of this city, and the shadow will quite literally die if he's not reunited with our main character. I'm not going to tell you what happens because I feel like you have to figure that out on your own, but in typical Murakami fashion, you just read this and you're confused and you don't really know what happened for sure, but nonetheless the writing is exceptional as always. This reminded me of my high school years. I went through a Murakami phase in high school, and I read not all of his books, but I read quite a few of them. I read Dance, 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 I read The Elephant Vanishes, Hardboiled Wonderland, and At the End of the World. I read Kafka on a Shore, Men Without Women, Norwegian Wood, Sputnik Sweetheart, and I also think I read The Wild Sheep Chase, although I'm not that sure on that one. Oh, and also The Wind Up Bird Chronicles. So I read quite a few of them. Do I remember anything from them? Not really, but I feel like in the new year I will go back to some Murakami because I really enjoyed the writing style in this one and the whole idea of the book. I love when a book just leaves you wondering with what happened, what was the purpose of this book, what happened to the characters, what are some explanations for some things that were happening and stuff like that. So yeah, this is Haruki Murakami's newest release, The City and Its Uncertain Walls. Okay, we are done. These are all of the books that I read during the month of November. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know in the comments down below what was your favorite book that you read during the month of November. Or anytime really, just let me know your favorite book and I will probably hopefully see you in the next one. Bye everyone!